Strap in, because this is not your average story about infidelity. This is about how one decision, one night, and one undeniable truth shattered the life I thought I knew. It's about betrayal, heartbreak, and the aftermath that no one sees coming. What happened to me could happen to anyone, and if you stick with me, I promise you won't just hear my story, you'll feel it. Sophia and I had been married for 8 years. From the outside, we seemed like the ideal couple. I worked as a software engineer, the kind of job that let me come home at a reasonable hour, cook dinner together, and keep our weekends free for road trips or lazy mornings on the couch. Sophia was a rising star in the world of marketing, her career taking her to new heights every year. Her confidence, her drive. It was one of the things I loved most about her. I used to tell my friends that I was the lucky one, that I had married the woman everyone else wished they could find. And for a long time, I believed that. But cracks don't start as earthquakes. They begin as tiny fractures, little hairline splits you don't even notice until it's too late. The first of those cracks came about 3 years ago. At first, it was little things. Sophia working late on big projects, canceling date nights, or pushing off plans because she was too busy. I'd always been her biggest cheerleader, so I told myself it was just a phase, a busy season in her career. But the little things grew into big things. Late nights became frequent, business trips got longer, and she started spending more time with her colleagues than she did with me. It wasn't just her absence, it was her presence when she was home. She wasn't the same. She didn't ask about my day or laugh at my dumb jokes like she used to. Even when she was sitting next to me, she seemed miles away. I started noticing how much time she spent on her phone. She'd smile at something on the screen, her fingers moving quickly as she typed. I'd ask, "What's so funny?" And she'd just say, "Oh, it's Nicole," or "just work stuff," before turning the screen away. I wanted to believe her. I chose to believe her. Because what was the alternative? To accuse her of something I didn't even want to admit to myself? The truth was, I missed her. I missed the woman who used to dance in the kitchen with me while we made dinner, who used to leave me sticky notes on the bathroom mirror with little hearts or jokes to start my day. I missed the way she used to light up when she saw me walk into her room. That light was gone now, replaced by something colder, something distant. Sophia, on the other hand, seemed to be thriving, or at least that's what everyone else saw. Her friends envied her glamorous career, her modern high-rise apartment with views of the city skyline, and her magnetic personality. She was the woman who could walk into any room and command attention, and people loved her for it. But what people didn't see was the emptiness beneath the surface. They didn't see the nights she came home exhausted, staring out the window as if the city lights could fill some void inside her. They didn't see the quiet moments at the dinner table, where her mind seemed somewhere far away, her plate barely touched. And they didn't see me, sitting there, holding on to hope like a man clinging to a lifeboat in a storm. I thought if I gave her space, she'd find her way back to me. If I was patient enough, understanding enough, she'd realize that what we had was worth saving. But patience only works if the other person is willing to meet you halfway. And Sophia wasn't. One Thursday evening, I was cleaning up after dinner when she came home late. She had texted earlier to say she was grabbing a quick bite with her team after work. Her tone was light, cheerful even, as if she wanted to remind me this was normal, nothing to worry about. But when she walked through the door, there was something different about her. She looked restless. She barely said hello before disappearing into the bedroom to change, leaving a faint trail of perfume and something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "Everything okay?" I asked when she finally reappeared, her face buried in her phone. "Oh yeah. Just tired," she said, glancing up for a moment before heading to the couch. She curled up there, phone in hand, and for the next hour, the only sound in the room was the occasional ping of her notifications. I wanted to ask her what was really going on. I wanted to tell her I missed her, that I felt like we were growing further apart with every passing day. But I didn't, because a part of me was afraid of what she might say. Instead, I let the moment pass, like I had so many times before. And that's the thing about cracks, they don't fix themselves. They grow, they widen, and eventually, they break you. What I didn't know was that Sophia's restlessness, her distance, wasn't just a phase. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something I couldn't have imagined even in my worst fears. Because less than a week later, Sophia would make a choice that would change everything. A choice that would take her out of our home and into the arms of two strangers at a bar, unraveling our marriage in ways I couldn't have prepared for. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon when Nicole's idea planted the seed of a reckless decision. Sophia stood in the office kitchen, stirring her third coffee of the day, her shoulders slumped from the weight of deadlines and the growing distance in her marriage. She barely noticed Nicole enter the room until her colleague leaned against the counter with her trademark grin. "Sophia," Nicole said, drawing out her name, "you need to come out tonight. Just one drink. You deserve it." Sophia gave a tired smile, shaking her head. "I can't. Alex is expecting me home. We have dinner plans." Nicole rolled her eyes. "Alex can handle one night on his own. You've been working like crazy, stuck in this routine. You need a break." The words hit Sophia harder than she expected. When was the last time she'd done something spontaneous? She thought about Alex at home, likely prepping dinner. He had texted earlier, excited about their plans, but the thought of yet another quiet night together felt more like an obligation than an escape. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. Nicole wasn't about to give up. "One drink. Just one. What's the worst that could happen?" Sophia glanced out the window. The city was coming alive, the streets buzzing with evening energy. It beckoned her, the lights, the noise, the sense of freedom. Finally, she sighed and set her coffee cup down. "Fine, just one drink." Nicole grinned triumphantly. "That's my girl." The crisp evening air greeted them as they left the office, blending with the hum of the city. Nicole walked ahead, confidently leading the way to the Red Lantern, a small bar known for its dim lighting and lively crowd. The neon sign above flickered, casting faint glows on the sidewalk. Sophia hesitated as they approached. Guilt tugged at her thoughts, reminding her of Alex waiting at home. But Nicole grabbed her arm, pulling her inside. "You're going to love this," she promised. The bar's warmth and noise hit Sophia immediately. Low lighting and thumping music blended with laughter and conversation. The chaos should have been overwhelming, but instead, it wrapped around her, muting the nagging voice of responsibility. Nicole found a small table near the bar, waving over a server. "2 cocktails," she said without hesitation. Sophia sat stiffly, her eyes scanning the crowd. She felt out of place, like she didn't belong here anymore. But when the drinks arrived, she took a hesitant sip, the sweetness masking the burn of alcohol. "This isn't bad," Sophia admitted, earning an excited grin from Nicole. "See? You needed this." Nicole raised her glass. "To letting loose." Sophia clinked her glass against Nicole's, her shoulders relaxing slightly as the drink settled in her system. The music thumped in rhythm with her pulse, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a small flicker of ease. That's when she saw them. 2 men stood near the bar, both tall and self-assured. One of them, with sharp features and dark eyes, caught her gaze and smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent a rush of heat to her cheeks. She quickly looked away, hoping Nicole hadn't noticed. But Nicole noticed everything. "Oh, he's definitely looking at you," she teased. "It's nothing," Sophia said, shaking her head, though her eyes betrayed her as they darted back toward the man. Nicole smirked. "Go talk to him." "No way," Sophia replied quickly, laughing nervously. Before she could protest further, the man began walking toward their table, his friend trailing behind. Her heart quickened as they approached, their confident strides cutting through the crowd. "Hi," the first man said smoothly, his voice warm and casual. "I'm Ethan, and this is Lucas. Mind if we join you?" Nicole grinned, clearly enjoying herself. "Not at all," she said, gesturing to the empty seats. Sophia's pulse raced as the 2 men sat down, their attention fixed on her. Ethan's gaze lingered, his smile unwavering. "Do you come here often?" he asked, his tone light and teasing. Sophia shook her head, offering a small laugh. "No, this is my first time." "Well, you picked a good night," he replied, leaning forward slightly. Nicole was already deep in conversation with Lucas, leaving Sophia and Ethan in their own little bubble. As they talked, Sophia found herself relaxing more, the alcohol and the lively atmosphere dulling the voice in her head whispering that she should be anywhere but here. This was supposed to be just one drink, a harmless night out to take the edge off. But as Ethan leaned closer, his dark eyes meeting hers, Sophia couldn't help but feel that the night was already slipping into uncharted territory. The night at the Red Lantern took on a life of its own. Sophia had come here for one drink, a fleeting escape from the weight of her life. But as she sat at the small table with Nicole, Ethan, and Lucas, the bar's energy wrapped around her like a warm, intoxicating blanket. Ethan, with his sharp features and confident smile, made conversation seem effortless. He asked questions that felt personal without being invasive, complimenting her in ways that were subtle but undeniably flattering. "I'm surprised I haven't seen you here before," Ethan said, leaning slightly closer, his voice cutting through the noise of the bar. "You seem different from the usual crowd." Sophia tilted her head, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Different how?" she asked, raising her glass to her lips. Ethan shrugged, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "You've got a quiet confidence. You don't need to shout to get noticed." Nicole, who was deep in conversation with Lucas, glanced over with a sly grin. "Oh, Ethan's good at this," she teased, nudging Sophia with her elbow. "Careful, he's a charmer." Sophia laughed, feeling a rush of heat rise to her cheeks. "I can tell," she said, her tone light and playful. The music in the bar shifted to a slower, more intimate rhythm, and the crowd seemed to follow suit. People moved closer together, conversations grew quieter, and the dim lighting took on a softer glow. "Do you want another drink?" Ethan asked, gesturing toward her nearly empty glass. Sophia hesitated, glancing at her watch. It was later than she had planned, and she knew Alex was likely wondering where she was. But the thought of going home to the silence of their apartment felt unappealing. Here, in this moment, she felt seen, something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Sure," she said finally, offering him a smile. Ethan signaled to the waitress, ordering 2 more cocktails. Lucas and Nicole were already laughing about something at the other end of the table, their connection seeming effortless. "So, tell me," Ethan began once the drinks arrived, "what brought you here tonight? You don't strike me as the bar-hopping type." Sophia took a sip of her drink, the sweet burn of the alcohol steadying her nerves. "I guess I just needed a break," she admitted. "Work's been a lot lately." "And life?" Ethan pressed gently, his gaze softening. Sophia hesitated. It felt dangerous to say too much, but at the same time, there was a strange comfort in the idea of confiding in someone who didn't know her well. "Life's complicated," she said simply. Ethan nodded as though he understood perfectly. "Sometimes complicated just means you need to step back and figure out what you really want." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Sophia felt as if he could see right through her. She glanced down at her drink, her thoughts swirling. What did she want? And how far was she willing to go to find it? Before she could dwell on the question, Ethan smiled and raised his glass. "To uncomplicated nights," he said. Sophia clinked her glass against his, the tension in her chest easing slightly as she took another sip. The hours seemed to blur after that. The conversation flowed easily, the drinks came steadily, and the world outside the bar faded into the background. Ethan leaned closer with every passing moment, his voice low and warm, his presence magnetic. Sophia found herself laughing more than she had in months. The weight of her responsibilities temporarily lifted. At some point, Nicole and Lucas disappeared into the crowd, leaving Sophia and Ethan alone at the table. The room felt smaller now, the noise of the bar fading into a distant hum. "You know," Ethan said, his voice almost a whisper, "I'm glad you decided to come out tonight." Sophia's heart fluttered, a mixture of excitement and apprehension tightening in her chest. "Why's that?" she asked, her voice soft. "Because I wouldn't have met you otherwise," he replied, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The moment lingered, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Sophia felt her pulse quicken, the room around her seeming to fade away entirely. She glanced at her phone, the screen lighting up with the time. It was well past when she told Alex she'd be home. A pang of guilt surged through her, but it was quickly drowned out by the warmth of Ethan's gaze. Here, in this dimly lit bar, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. She reached for her drink, taking a long sip to steady herself. "It's been a while since I've done anything like this," she admitted. "Then let's make the most of it," Ethan said, his smile widening. For a fleeting moment, Sophia wondered how far she was willing to let the night go. The lines between right and wrong had already begun to blur, and the thrill of the unknown pulled her forward like a current she couldn't fight. But deep down, a voice whispered that every choice came with consequences, and tonight, she was on the brink of making one she couldn't take back. The night had taken on a surreal quality, like a dream Sophia didn't want to wake from. The warmth of the dimly lit bar, the steady rhythm of the music, and the electric pull of Ethan's gaze wrapped around her, silencing the voice in her head that told her she should be anywhere but here. The hours had slipped by unnoticed. Her drink had long since been emptied, and another had appeared in its place, courtesy of Ethan. Nicole and Lucas were nowhere to be seen, lost somewhere in the crowd, leaving Sophia and Ethan alone at their small table. Ethan leaned in closer, his voice low enough to cut through the noise of the bar without anyone else hearing. "It's rare to meet someone who feels different," he said, his words deliberate, his eyes steady on hers. Sophia laughed softly, a nervous edge to her tone. "I'm not sure how different I really am," she replied. "You don't see yourself clearly then," he said, his smile faint but sincere. The flattery was intoxicating, as was the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room. It had been so long since she'd felt this kind of attention, this rush of feeling noticed, admired. She knew it was wrong to let it affect her, to let it feel so good. And yet, she didn't want it to stop. As the night wore on, the boundaries she'd clung to in her mind began to blur. The excuses came easily. Alex would understand if she stayed out a little longer. He trusted her, didn't he? It was harmless, just drinks and conversation, nothing more. "Let's get some air," Ethan suggested suddenly, gesturing toward the bar's side exit. Sophia hesitated, her pulse quickening. "I don't know. It's just outside," Ethan said with a reassuring smile. "It's too loud in here, and I want to keep talking to you." His words felt harmless, even considerate, and before she could think too much about it, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she said, standing and following him toward the exit. The cool night air hit her like a wave as they stepped out into the alley behind the bar. The sound of the city buzzed faintly in the distance, muted by the buildings that surrounded them. The contrast between the lively chaos inside and the quiet stillness of the alley was jarring, yet somehow comforting. Ethan leaned against the brick wall, his posture relaxed, his gaze unwavering. "You've been holding back all night," he said, his tone teasing. "Why is that?" Sophia folded her arms, leaning slightly against the wall opposite him. "I'm not holding back," she said defensively. Ethan raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile creeping across his face. "You are. There's something you're not saying, something you're keeping inside." Sophia looked away, her thoughts spinning. He wasn't wrong. There was something she wasn't saying. She hadn't told him about Alex, about her marriage, about the guilt that was starting to gnaw at the edges of her mind. But she didn't want to tell him. She didn't want to break the spell of the night. "It's complicated," she said finally, her voice quiet. Ethan nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "Complicated can be good," he said. "It means you're thinking, feeling, living." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the only sound the distant hum of the city. Sophia felt her heart pounding in her chest. This was a crossroads. She could feel it. A part of her wanted to walk away, to return to the safety of her life with Alex, to pretend this night had never happened. But another part of her, the part that felt alive and free for the first time in years, wanted to stay. Ethan took a small step closer, his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't overbearing, wasn't pressuring her, but his presence was magnetic, drawing her in like a current she couldn't fight. "I'm glad you came out tonight," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia looked up at him, her thoughts racing. She knew this was the moment she needed to make a choice. She could end it now, walk away before things went too far. Or she could let herself get swept up in the moment, consequences be damned. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the spell. She pulled it out and saw Alex's name on the screen. For a moment, she just stared at it, her stomach twisting with guilt. Ethan noticed and stepped back slightly. "You don't have to answer that," he said gently. Sophia hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. The choice felt monumental, like the outcome of her entire life hinged on this one decision. After a long moment, she silenced the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. She looked up at Ethan, her expression a mixture of uncertainty and resolve. Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes searching hers. "You're safe with me," he said. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that Sophia couldn't ignore. For better or worse, she had made her choice. The alley outside the Red Lantern was quiet, the city's distant hum barely reaching the narrow space. Sophia's decision lingered in the air, heavy and irreversible. She hadn't answered Alex's call, a small act that felt monumental. It was a choice she couldn't take back, no matter how she tried to rationalize it. Ethan's steady gaze hadn't wavered, his presence magnetic and unrelenting. "Come on," he said softly, his tone inviting but not forceful. "Let's find somewhere quieter. I think we both need a change of scenery." Sophia's stomach twisted. She knew what he meant, and yet the thrill of the unknown pulled at her. A part of her screamed to stop, to step away from the brink. But the other part, the part that had been suffocated by years of routine, couldn't resist. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." Ethan smiled faintly and gestured toward the street. They walked side by side, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Sophia's heart raced, her mind a chaotic swirl of guilt, excitement, and dread. Every step away from the bar felt like a step further from the life she had known. A life she had promised to cherish but now felt more distant than ever. Ethan hailed a cab, and they slipped inside. The ride was quiet, the tension thick as neither of them spoke. Sophia glanced at her phone again, the screen dark now. She thought about Alex, about how he was likely waiting for her at home, his worry growing with each passing hour. Her chest tightened, but Ethan's presence next to her seemed to drown out everything else. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. He looked calm, assured, as if he had no doubts about where this night was heading. When the cab stopped outside a boutique hotel, Sophia hesitated for a brief moment. Her feet felt rooted to the ground, a silent war raging inside her. But Ethan was already holding the door open, waiting for her to follow. "Let's go," he said gently, his voice carrying both confidence and patience. She stepped out of the cab, her legs moving as if on autopilot. They entered the lobby, and Ethan handled everything, speaking to the concierge with practiced ease. It was clear he had done this before, a fact that both unsettled and intrigued her. They took the elevator to the third floor, the silence between them now deafening. Sophia's pulse was erratic, her breathing shallow as they reached the room. Ethan opened the door, stepping inside and waiting for her to follow. The room was minimalist but elegant, the dim lighting casting a soft glow on the sleek furniture. Sophia stood frozen just inside the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan turned to her, his expression softer now, less confident but still inviting. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. Sophia's thoughts collided in her mind. She could leave, walk out the door and return to Alex, to the safety and familiarity of the life they had built together. But that life felt so far away now, like something that belonged to someone else. She stepped further into the room, letting the door click shut behind her. The night passed in a blur of decisions Sophia would later struggle to piece together. Ethan was charming, attentive, and intoxicatingly present in a way she hadn't felt from anyone in years. He listened, he laughed, and he made her feel like the center of the universe. But with every moment she stayed, the weight of her betrayal grew heavier. She thought of Alex's face, the way he looked at her when she walked through the door after a long day. She thought of the quiet moments they used to share, the laughter they had let slip away. And yet, she didn't stop. When the morning light crept through the curtains, Sophia was lying on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Ethan was still asleep, his breathing steady, his presence suddenly too much for her to bear. She rose quietly, gathering her things as quickly as she could. Her heart pounded as she slipped out the door, the hallway feeling impossibly long as she made her way to the elevator. The ride down to the lobby felt surreal, the events of the night replaying in her mind like a movie she couldn't turn off. By the time she stepped outside, the cool morning air hit her like a slap. Sophia hailed a cab and gave the driver her address, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. She had missed several calls from Alex, his name flashing on the screen like a beacon of everything she had just destroyed. As the cab wove through the city streets, Sophia's chest tightened with every passing block. By the time they reached her apartment, she could barely breathe. The porch light was off, a small detail, but it struck her like a blow. Alex always left it on for her, a gesture of warmth and welcome. But tonight, it was dark, as if he already knew. Sophia stepped inside, her heart heavy as she closed the door behind her. The silence of the apartment was suffocating, every shadow feeling like an accusation. She froze when she saw the kitchen counter. A neatly stacked pile of papers sat waiting for her, a letter on top. Her hands shook as she reached for it, her breath catching in her throat. "Sophia," the letter began. "I can't keep living like this. I know about the lies, the late nights, and everything else. If you want to save this, meet me at the Pinewood Hotel, room 304, by 5 p.m. on Friday. If you don't show, I'll know where we stand. The divorce papers are ready." Her vision blurred as she read the final line. "This is your choice now." Sophia clutched the letter to her chest, her knees buckling as the weight of her choices crashed down on her. She had crossed the line, and now she would have to face the fallout. The words from Alex's letter echoed in Sophia's mind, loud and relentless. "If you want to save this, meet me at the Pinewood Hotel, room 304, by 5 p.m. on Friday." She had read the letter so many times that the words seemed burned into her memory, but they didn't make the decision any easier. Sophia sat on the couch, the divorce papers resting on the coffee table in front of her. The velvet box containing her engagement ring sat beside them, its presence as painful as a wound that refused to heal. She stared at it, her thoughts a mess of guilt, regret, and denial. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. Normally, Alex would have been there, reading on the couch, cooking dinner, or simply moving around the space that now felt so unbearably empty. But he wasn't there. His absence was louder than anything else. Sophia told herself she still had time. Friday was 2 days away, and she could figure out what to say, how to fix the damage she had caused. She clung to the hope that Alex still loved her enough to give her another chance. He had always been patient, forgiving, and understanding. Surely, he wouldn't walk away so easily. But deep down, she knew she had pushed him too far this time. The following day, Sophia buried herself in work, hoping to distract herself from the looming deadline. She told herself that if she stayed busy enough, the weight pressing on her chest would ease. But it didn't. Every glance at her phone, every silence in the office felt like a reminder of what she had done. By the time the evening rolled around, the thought of facing her empty apartment was unbearable. Nicole had texted earlier, inviting her back to the Red Lantern with a group of friends. Normally, Sophia would have declined, but tonight, the pull of distraction was too strong. The bar was as lively as ever, the hum of music and laughter wrapping around her like a shield against her guilt. Nicole greeted her with a grin, already halfway through her first drink. "There's my favorite workaholic," Nicole said, pulling Sophia into a quick hug. "I knew you couldn't stay away forever." Sophia forced a smile, though it felt hollow. She accepted the drink Nicole handed her and took a sip, the familiar sweetness dulling the sharp edge of her thoughts. As the night went on, Sophia slipped further into the noise and energy of the bar. She laughed at jokes she barely heard, engaged in conversations she wouldn't remember, and let the weight of her guilt fade into the background. But no matter how much she tried to lose herself, the nagging voice in her mind refused to be silenced. "What are you doing here?" the voice asked. "You should be at home, fixing this." Fixing him. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Alex's contact. But the thought of hearing his voice, of facing his disappointment, made her chest tighten. Instead, she silenced the screen and shoved the phone back into her bag. The hours passed in a blur, and by the time Sophia stumbled back into her apartment, the weight of her choices came crashing down again. The silence was deafening, the reminder of Alex's absence unbearable. Friday arrived far too quickly, and with it, the decision she had been avoiding. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, staring at the clock. It was already 4:30 p.m., and the Pinewood Hotel was a 20-minute drive away. Her hands trembled as she reached for the divorce papers, her mind racing. She had always told herself that Alex would forgive her, that he would come back like he always did. But now, faced with the possibility of losing him forever, she wasn't so sure. She glanced at her phone, debating whether to call him, to tell him she was on her way. But the thought of seeing the pain in his eyes, of hearing the finality in his voice, made her freeze. At 5 p.m., Sophia was still sitting at the table, her car keys untouched beside her. By the time 5:30 rolled around, she knew she had made her choice, whether she wanted to admit it or not. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Sophia tried to distract herself with television, with cleaning, with anything that would keep her mind off Alex. But nothing worked. The thought of him waiting at the hotel, hoping she would show, haunted her. When she finally fell into a restless sleep, she dreamed of their wedding day, the way he had looked at her with such love and hope. The memory was so vivid it felt like a knife twisting in her chest. The next morning, Sophia woke to find another letter on the kitchen counter. Her stomach dropped as she opened it, her hands trembling. "Sophia, you didn't show. I waited, but now I know where we stand. The account is closed. The papers are filed. The house will be listed next week. I hope you find what you're looking for. Goodbye, Alex." Sophia's breath caught in her throat, her vision blurring as the weight of his words sank in. It was over. She had waited too long, avoided too much, and now she had lost him for good. The silence in the apartment felt colder than ever. Sophia sat down at the table, clutching the letter in her hands as the reality of her choices crashed down around her. There was no going back. The fallout had begun. In the days that followed Alex's final letter, Sophia felt like she was moving through a fog. The silence in the apartment was suffocating, a stark reminder of everything she had lost. Every glance at the stack of divorce papers on the kitchen counter filled her with a mix of dread and guilt, but she couldn't bring herself to touch them. At work, Sophia tried to keep her head down and focus, hoping the distraction would help. But the whispers had already started. Rumors about her nights out, about her slipping focus, and even her personal life spread like wildfire. She caught fragments of conversations in the hallways, the glances from co-workers that lingered just a little too long. It wasn't long before her manager, Miriam, called her into her office. The stern but fair woman gestured for Sophia to sit, her expression neutral but serious. "Sophia," Miriam began, her voice steady, "you've been one of our top performers for years, and I've always valued your work. But lately, it's clear that something is affecting your performance." She paused, folding her hands on the desk. "Is there anything you'd like to share?" Sophia hesitated, her throat dry. What could she say? That she had torched her marriage and her life was spiraling out of control? Instead, she forced a small smile. "I'm sorry if I've been off. I've just been dealing with some personal challenges." Miriam nodded, her expression softening slightly. "I understand, but we can't let personal issues interfere with the work. I think it might be best if you took a step back to focus on yourself." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Sophia managed a nod and murmured, "I understand," before leaving the office. As she walked back to her desk, the weight of her situation pressed down harder. The whispers seemed louder now, the stares more pointed. She packed up her things in silence, her carefully built reputation unraveling around her. At home, the isolation was unbearable. Sophia reached out to Nicole, desperate for someone to talk to, but her text went unanswered. Even Nicole, the person who had once been her closest confidant, seemed to be pulling away. Desperate for a distraction, Sophia returned to the Red Lantern. The lively atmosphere had once felt like an escape, but now it felt hollow. She sat at the bar, nursing a drink and watching the crowd around her. The laughter and chatter that had once energized her now felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had thrown away. Sophia tried dating, hoping that meeting someone new might fill the void. She went on a few dates with men who seemed charming and attentive at first, but each one left her feeling emptier than before. None of them could make her forget Alex, and none of them could erase the regret that had taken root deep inside her. One night, after another failed date, Sophia returned to her apartment and sat in the dimly lit living room. She stared at the divorce papers on the table, the words blurring as tears filled her eyes. She thought about Alex, his patience, his kindness, and the way he had always been there for her. He had given her everything, and she had taken it for granted. She had assumed he would always be there, no matter what, and now she was facing the reality of her choices. Sophia picked up the letter he had left, reading his words again as if they might change. The account is closed. The papers are filed. The house will be listed next week. The finality of it hit her all over again. She had lost him, and there was no going back. For the first time, Sophia allowed herself to cry. She cried for Alex, for the love they had shared, and for the life she had destroyed. She cried for the person she used to be and the future she had thrown away. The fallout of her choices was complete, and there was no escaping it. All she could do now was figure out how to pick up the pieces and move forward, even if she had to do it alone. The weeks following the divorce were heavy and isolating. Sophia's apartment, once vibrant with shared memories, now felt cold and barren. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the wall, reminded her of Alex's absence. The silence was relentless, pressing down on her with a weight that no distraction could lift. The divorce papers were finalized quickly, but the closure they brought felt hollow. With each passing day, Sophia replayed her choices, the nights she had spent chasing temporary excitement while the man who had loved her unconditionally waited at home. Sophia tried to distract herself. She cleaned obsessively, hoping that an immaculate space might help her feel more in control. She returned to the bar she had once loved, but the energy of the crowd now felt alien. The laughter and music that had once been an escape now only amplified her loneliness. She attempted dating, thinking that meeting someone new might help fill the void. But no connection could replace what she had lost. Each conversation felt shallow, and every smile reminded her of Alex's warmth. One night, Sophia scrolled through old photos of her and Alex. Their wedding day, vacations, and quiet evenings at home filled the screen. Each image was a painful reminder of the love she had taken for granted. The realization hit her with full force. She couldn't undo the past, but she could rebuild her future. For the first time, Sophia resolved to confront her mistakes and begin again. Months after the divorce was finalized, Sophia's life had settled into a monotonous rhythm. Days were spent at her new job in a small boutique, where she folded clothes and chatted with customers, and evenings were quiet, often spent painting or walking aimlessly through the city. She was rebuilding, step by step, but the void Alex's absence left felt as wide as ever. On an unremarkable Saturday morning, as Sophia browsed a local farmer's market, her world tilted unexpectedly. She had stopped at a stand to admire a bouquet of sunflowers when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Sophia?" She froze, her heart racing as she turned around. There he was, Alex. He looked different, but not in a way she could immediately define. His posture was relaxed, his expression calm, and his eyes no longer carried the weight they once had. "Alex," she said softly, the name catching in her throat. He smiled faintly, a mixture of surprise and cautious friendliness. "It's been a while," he said. Sophia nodded, unsure of what to say. The memories of their life together, and the pain of how it had ended, rushed to the surface. But Alex's demeanor was steady, unshaken, as if he had found peace in a way she hadn't. "How are you?" he asked, his tone polite but genuine. "I'm getting by," Sophia replied, her voice faltering. "And you?" "I'm good," Alex said with a small nod. "Better, actually. Things are finally settling down." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. Sophia wanted to apologize, to explain herself, but the weight of her mistakes felt too large for words. Instead, she asked, "How did you know?" About everything? Alex's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of sadness crossing his face. I think I always knew something was wrong, he said. But it was little things at first, the late nights, the way you'd avoid certain questions. And then, he hesitated, his voice quiet but steady. Someone sent me a photo. You were at the bar with them, and it wasn't hard to figure out the rest. Sophia's chest tightened, her mind reeling as she imagined Alex seeing that image. The betrayal etched into his voice was subtle, but it was enough to shatter her composure. I'm so sorry, Alex, she whispered, tears threatening to spill. He held up a hand, stopping her. I'm not here to rehash everything. I've moved on, and I hope you can too. The words stung, but they were spoken with kindness. Sophia nodded, unable to speak. Before she could think of anything to say, Alex glanced at his watch. I need to go, he said, his tone lightening. But take care of yourself, Sophia. As he walked away, Sophia stood frozen, the encounter leaving her shaken yet oddly grounded. Alex was healing, and she realized she needed to continue her own journey, no matter how difficult it might be. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of clarity. Her mistakes had shaped her, but they didn't have to define her. It was time to move forward. It had been over a year since Sophia last saw Alex at the farmer's market. Time had moved both quickly and painfully slowly, and while she was still rebuilding her life, she had made progress. Her days were filled with work at the boutique, painting, and small steps toward reconnecting with herself. Therapy had helped her unpack the choices that had led to her downfall, and though the regret lingered, she was beginning to accept that the past could not be changed, only learned from. One Saturday afternoon, as Sophia walked through the park near her apartment, she stopped at a small cafe to grab a coffee. It was a warm day, and families were out enjoying the sunshine, their laughter filling the air. She was seated at an outdoor table, sipping her drink and sketching in her notebook, when a familiar voice broke her concentration. Sophia? She looked up, and her breath caught in her throat. It was Alex, standing a few feet away. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman with soft brown hair and kind eyes, holding the hand of a small boy who couldn't have been older than 2. Alex, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a genuine but slightly surprised expression crossing his face. Hi, he said. It's been a while. Sophia's gaze shifted to the woman and the child, her heart sinking and swelling all at once. The woman offered a polite smile, her demeanor warm but reserved. This is Emily, Alex said, introducing the woman. And this little guy is Liam. Sophia forced a smile, her emotions a whirlwind. It's nice to meet you, Emily, she said softly, glancing at the boy. And Liam. Emily nodded. It's nice to meet you too, she said, her tone kind but cautious. She stepped aside slightly, giving Alex and Sophia a bit of space. Sophia and Alex stood there for a moment, an unspoken understanding passing between them. She noticed how relaxed he seemed, how different from the man she had last known. You look happy, she said finally, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. Alex's smile softened. I am, he said. Life's different now, but it's good. Better, even. Sophia nodded, unsure of what to say. She had prepared for the idea that Alex might move on, but seeing it in front of her, his new family, his new life, was a different kind of pain. I'm glad, she said sincerely. You deserve it. There was a pause, and Alex studied her for a moment. And you? He asked. How are you doing? Sophia hesitated, then said, Better. I've been working on myself, trying to figure things out. It's not easy, but I'm getting there. Alex nodded, his expression one of quiet approval. That's good to hear. I hope you keep moving forward. Emily stepped back into the conversation, sensing it was time to move on. We should get going, she said gently, her eyes kind as they met Sophia's. Alex nodded, turning to Liam and lifting him into his arms. The boy giggled, wrapping his tiny hands around Alex's neck. Take care of yourself, Sophia, Alex said, his tone genuine. You too, she replied, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. As they walked away, Sophia remained seated, watching the small family disappear into the crowd. The encounter was bittersweet, but it brought a strange sense of closure. Alex was happy, and while she would always regret losing him, she knew he was where he belonged. Sophia looked down at her sketchbook, her pencil resting lightly on the page. She drew a single, delicate line across the blank space, as if marking the beginning of something new. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace with the idea of a future she could build for herself, one step, one day at a time. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would have happened if Sophia had met Alex at the Pinewood Hotel as he asked? If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.